Hi, guys. Today I want to talk about cages, and that is why I am in front of my three cages with Olive. Olive, do you want to say something? Meh, 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 meh. You don't want to talk? Okay, that's okay. So, there was one subject that I wanted to talk about for quite a while now, which is, for me, it's the myth of no high cages. And I will get a little bit more in details of why I think this is a myth. Are you playing in my hair, Olive? We're going to try to do this with Olive, and I have the budgies out as well. I just can't get Lucy out at the same time, but we're going to try this out and we'll see how it goes. Yes, so I really wanted to talk about this myth, and this actually made me think about, well, maybe I should also go a little bit more in depth and talk about how can we choose our cages. There is some criteria I think we need to look at when we are shopping for cages. And basically, those are also the criterias that help me choose my favorite cage for now, which is the ones that you see behind me. So first, let's just talk about that actual myth that I wanted to talk about, why this idea of talking about cages came in the first place. The budgies are going to be flying all around. This is going to be an interesting video for you guys. I'm going to try my best not to be too distracted over here. So the myth of the no high cages, or more so the myth of, don't bite me, you, or more so the myth of the cage should always be larger than higher. Although this is partially true in the sense that some cages that are very narrow and very high, I don't use this cage as a cage. It's more so like a stand that I use in the kitchen when one of my birds is hanging out with me in the kitchen or eating their breakfast in the morning. Sometimes I will have them eat their breakfast over there. But I don't use this as a cage. This is the perfect example of a cage that is too narrow, not wide enough, and not deep enough. Having said that, I think that it's a myth to only consider cages that would be larger than higher. The example for this is actually the first cage that I got for my budgies. Sorry, I got distracted. I need to look at those guys because Olive is going to see the budgies that are eating on the play stand right now. And I don't want to have a fight. Do you want to come see me? No? Okay, that's fine. You're behind me? We're okay. All right, we're good. So that cage, when you look at the measurements, that cage is actually wider than it is tall. But overall, the cage is way too small. So if you think about just getting a cage larger or wider than it is tall, it may not actually be the best cage. Now, the other thing that I hear often, and this is actually a question that had been asked to me, is, are your birds are actually using the entire space of the cage? Because there's a myth that birds will only use the top part of the cage. Hey, don't bite me. That they will only use the top part of the cage. And if you can see, that's my budgie's cage. And they have toys all around, and they have that ladder in the bottom. And this morning they were actually having a lot of fun in the bottom of their cages. So yes, they are using the entire cage. The other thing I hear often is specifically for budgies, that budgies cannot fly vertically. They can only fly horizontally. Is that even a word? You know what I mean? They can only fly horizontal, so from left to right, right to left, but they cannot fly up and down, which is totally wrong. Okay, I might have to put her back in her cage because she's being a little, look at her now, look at her. I think the reason why people say this, it's because these birds in captivity, usually budgies, are being kept in really small cages and they don't have the opportunity to actually fly and to practice ascending and descending. My budgies, I didn't have to actually teach them to do that. They, by being in a really big cage like this, oh, are we going to have problems here? Come here. Come here. Okay. By having a really big cage like this, it gives them and I'm placing toys all over, right? Their bath is usually a little bit lower as well. So it gives them the opportunity to actually fly all the way around, and they're now able to descend all the way to the floor. No problem to go up and down, and they can go from a perch that is really high up all the way to the perch that is really, really lower. Olive, for example, could do the same thing. She has a perch down here and she's able to fly up and down, no issue at all. So that myth saying that birds only use the top part of the cage, so there's no point of buying a big cage like this, it's just a myth. It's absolutely not true. And I'm talking by experience here. So they are actually using the entire cage. Having said that, yes, when they are sleeping on the top. So they're usually, when they're just when they're just resting and being all sleepy, they're going to rest usually on the higher perch. But other than that, they will fly all around in their cage. I think that getting the biggest cage that you can is actually a really good thing, regardless of how big or small your bird is. And I've talked about this in other videos. I think it's really, really important. So the biggest cage that you can afford, I mean, money-wise, because these babies are not cheap. And then the biggest cage also that you can afford in the space, because yes, this takes a lot of space. My living room, which eventually I'm hoping will become a bird room, and my living room will be somewhere else. There's a little bit of fight here. Somewhere else in the house. So it's going to give me a little bit more space that I could put a bigger cage for Lucy here, because although she does have a lot of space, in my opinion, this is a little bit too small for her, in my opinion. And I will talk a little bit later why. But yes, the biggest cage you can get in your space and that you can afford financially. Although I just talk about get the biggest, if your bird is going to be free in the house, which some people, it totally works with their lifestyle. So, or they have a bird room, for example, that's the bird room. Their bird is only there. They don't need a big cage, because the cage that they're going to need is only for sleeping, right? So we call it a sleeper cage. Then it really doesn't matter if it's really, really small, because that bird is only going to sleep. And when they sleep in their cages, they don't actually fly around or anything like that. They just sleep. They stay in one spot, they sleep, and that's it. So it really depends on the purpose. Now, if you're like me and you do need big cages because you're not working from home, or you're not retired, or whatever the case may be, I am working 40 hours a week outside of my home, and I have 4 birds of 3 different sizes. They cannot be loose in the house. There's no way. And they cannot be all housed together either in a big aviary, because that would be unsafe, especially for my smaller birds, but for any of them, right? And I can go in details about this in another video, but the idea is that that would not be safe. So I don't have an option. I have to house them separately. Only the budgies are together in the same cage, but all the other ones are separate. And I cannot leave them out. So I need cages to house them during the day. So they absolutely need the biggest cage I can give them. Now, the other thing you want to look at is the material that this cage is made of. The best is stainless steel, but let's be honest here. Stainless steel is very, very expensive. Not a lot of people can afford stainless steel. I don't have stainless steel cages. Now, the second option would be powder coated, as it is not toxic for birds. You just have to make sure that there's no chip or anything like that. Or usually it's pretty good regarding rust. It's pretty resistant, but you need to still take a look at it. And if you start seeing rust appearing or chipped area that are chipped or anything, then maybe it's time to replace your cage. But those would be the two options. When it comes to aviaries or bigger space, sometimes you'll see things like galvanized metal, which is a really, really bad option, because they're using zinc in the process, and zinc is extremely toxic for birds. So no galvanized metal for aviaries. Aviaries, again, same thing. You want to look at, are you okay? Can I talk? You want to look at stainless steel, which is, again, extremely expensive, or you want to look at powder coated. Now you also want to look at the space between bars, because depending on your birds, you will most likely need different space, right? So these ones, they're about half an inch of space, which is really good for budgies, for conures, for Indian ringnecks. It's not a problem. It's really good for that. But for my budgies, you wouldn't go with a 3/4 inch, because, or even an inch. Or even for my conure, I want to say I would be careful. Conure, my little conure and my little ringneck, to be careful with a 1 inch space, because the last thing you want to do is have your bird get their head stuck between two bars, right? So you want to be careful with that, and that's just a matter of safety, really. The other thing that goes with bars is the thickness of those bars. So mine, they're not really thick. They're pretty thin, actually, but it really doesn't matter, because I have smaller birds, so their beak is smaller. You could never get a cage like this with thinner bars with, I want to say, I mean, nowhere Mecca can go in there anyways, but you want to be careful. Sometimes there's like cheaper options of cage, and they are big. They have like in the 1 inch bar space, and they're powder coated, but they are a cheaper option. But then when you look at the thickness of the bars, it's thin, just like these ones, and they can easily be broken by bigger beaks like macaws, African greys, even I want to say like eclectus. So any birds that have a bigger beak that could damage to the point of like cutting the bar, you want to avoid this. You want to have a thicker type of bar for your cage. The last thing I want to talk about, I want to kind of come back in regards to how big your cage should be. Yes, I said as big as you can, But sometimes you're restricted in the space and you wonder, is that big enough for my bird? So you definitely want to make sure that your bird can actually spring their wings, and even be able to flap their wings a little bit in their cages. I mean, the best would be to be able to fly. If they're able to fly from a perch to another one, like my conure and my budgies in their cages, that's the best. But the bare minimum would be, in my opinion, that they can flap their wings. Now, and flap their wings while having perches and toys that they can destroy in their cages. Now, Lucy, if you look at Lucy over there, Indian ringnecks are a pretty small bird, but they have a really long tail. And their wingspan is pretty big, actually, for a smaller bird like this. So she can flap her wings, but she's unable to fly from a perch to another one because of the size of the cage. This, for me, is the absolute minimum I could have for an Indian ringneck. Oh, you probably can't see it, but Olive is losing her mind on the toy. It was really funny. So my goal is to actually get a cage that is a little bit more aviary style. Right now, I just don't have the space for this, but I'm working on something. So in April, I'm going to have a room upstairs that I will be able to use as a living room. So I am thinking of getting rid of a few things in here. So my couch, you don't see it, but you just see my cages behind me. But on this side, I have my couch, and then I have a working desk, and then I have my TV. So if I can get some of these, well, at least the couch and the TV, if I can get that upstairs in that new living room space that I want to do, then it's going to free up some space, and I might be able eventually to get an aviary. Once I have the space, it's going to be a matter of money, but I'm working towards that goal to get something that is a little bit more aviary style for Lucy, so that she can fly from a perch to another one. I think that would be awesome for her to be able to do that. I mean, yes, she gets exercise because in the morning when she wakes up, she just fly back and forth between the kitchen and I have a big hallway in between the kitchen and the living room that she's flying back and forth. Same thing at night. And then I do some training recall with her. So she does get exercise every day, but she doesn't get the exercise that the other ones get in their cage during the day. And I feel like it's a little bit unfortunate. So this is a project of mine in the future. So I'll update you guys once it's in progress or completed or whatever. I'll give you an update. So if you want to know those updates, make sure you subscribe to Annie's Flock to know what's coming up with my flock. Take care. Bye.